Showtime.
He high points the ball. Touchdown, OBJ. OBJ brings it in.
Whenever he gets the ball, I think everybody's holding their breath. They know he can take it the distance.
And that's what Odell Beckham Jr. brings to your team.
No count.
This is my career. I don't want my spine like a pizza.
All right, so Odell Beckham Jr. still has the potential to be a dynamic piece in a contender's offense, but do you want to pay the money for him? We'll get into that in just a little bit. Why are you doing that? What is that?
UConn.
Are you saying that your
National
Huskies,
champion?
are you saying that your socks are UConn socks?
Red, white, blue, the colors
Okay.
of UConn.
We'll talk about UConn a little bit later on. That that is going to be a topic of discussion as they're in the national championship, and Dan is proudly supporting his school. We welcome you to NFL Live. Dan, Mina, Adam is here. Hey, let's talk about Odell Beckham Jr. He remains unsigned. There have been a number of sticking points in his journey to find a new team as you see him working out for some teams recently. Adam Schefter, what's the latest?
Well, Laura, who would have thought that Aaron Rodgers might be the single factor holding up Odell's signing in the end? But I think everybody, including Odell Beckham Jr., is waiting to see if and when the Jets get a deal done with Aaron Rodgers, at which point Odell Beckham Jr. would have some interest in uniting forces with Aaron Rodgers, and obviously the interest would be mutual, with Rodgers having mentioned Beckham's name to the Jets front office during their visit. So I think these two sides are waiting to see what happens. In the interim, the Baltimore Ravens have met with Odell Beckham Jr. They've presented him their own offer. We'll see which Odell Beckham Jr. finds more interesting, but it certainly sounds like it's the Jets, it's the Ravens, maybe the Rams still would have an interest, but those at this point in time would be the obvious landing spots for Odell Beckham Jr. in what has been one of the longest free agent recruitments that we've ever seen.
I mean, stop me if you've heard this before, that Aaron Rodgers is the domino that needs to fall for other things to happen. Of course, we'll keep an eye on that and more Adam coming throughout the show. But ESPN's Rich Cimini reported that Beckham is thought to be seeking a deal in the one-year, $15 million range. Okay, so here's the company OBJ would potentially be in if he gets a contract worth $15 million per year. Three wide receivers currently making between $15 and $16 million. That's Hunter Renfrow, Allen Robinson, and Courtland Sutton. All of those three players combined for only 7 touchdown catches last year. So it kind of puts in perspective. I know $15 million feels like a lot of money for us normal people, but just what the value is for that type of player right now in the league. Is Odell worth it, Dan, for a contending team at that price?
Yeah, if he's going to give you those 45 catches for like 500 yards, which is kind of what those three players that were on that graphic averaged last year, absolutely. Now, this is the assumption game of, is Odell back to being healthy like he was in the back end of that Super Bowl run? And I love the addition to the Jets because he's not the guy. He's the guy to get the matchup. Garrett Wilson is the guy, and he's a 1,000-yard or 1,400-yard receiver, 100-catch guy with Aaron Rodgers next year in New York. Odell's the matchup, and for the Jets, it's really, do you want Odell added to that offense while also being able then to do whatever you want with the 13th pick and likely another second-round pick? Or do you have to feel like you mandatory need to get a receiver at potentially 13 or that extra second round pick because you don't have Odell? That's weighed into this conversation, not only the price tag, but how he fits into their offense.
I don't know if they're holding on to that that second round pick with the Rodgers trade. So this is tricky for me because so much of it depends on what Dan said, which is Odell the guy we saw during the Super Bowl run? Because over the course of the 2021 season, he started 13 games. If you just look at from when he joined the Rams in the fall and even take out the Browns, he ranked outside the top 50 in yards per route run, yards after catch per target, catch rate, several statistics. However, when you got to the playoffs and he kind of rounded into form and they figured out how to use him with Cooper Kupp, he produced at the level we really saw early in his career. Yeah. And if I could guarantee, Dan, that these teams were getting that guy, I would say $15 million is a no-brainer, especially for a team like the Jets that's so clearly all in. Yeah. I'm a little bit more skeptical about the Ravens. But it is a bit of a question mark and a bit of a projection, and I think it's going to come down to whether or not there's like a legitimate market for him at that price.
And that's a question he may want. $15 million a year, but he could want whatever number he wants. It's going to be a question here of what teams are willing to offer. And we don't know that he's got an offer of $15 million, maybe with incentives, yes. But the fact of the matter is you could want anything you want, but really the reality is what a team is going to be willing to pay him. And in the end, if it's that much more than another team, then that would give that team an advantage.
Yeah, you shoot for high, and hopefully a team kind of comes in somewhere near that number. Two things I do think are important to point out when it comes to the Jets equation. Number one, you only do it if you can guarantee it does not hinder the development and growth of Garrett Wilson. Because I honestly believe Garrett's a top 5 player at that position with Aaron. The second thing is they do have 2 good tight ends in New York. So now we are starting to have the conversation of 2 good tight ends, 2 good young backs. You already have Garrett that I mentioned and signed Allen Lazard. You want to make sure that you're in the optimum personnel groupings for your football team, not just acquiring, brand name talent, so to speak. So it's got to be a really good, ideal setting for both parties.
I hear what you're saying. It also makes sense to me that Odell, certainly not the healthy, younger Odell that we once saw, might be in a better situation in an offense like that where he doesn't have to be the 100%. Main guy, which certainly that would be the case in New York. All right, an Aaron Rodgers update's coming in seconds. Plenty more happening around the league right now. Adam, get us caught up on top stories. We begin with D-line prospect Jalen Carter out of Georgia.
Hey, he's in Chicago today visiting with the Bears, and a lot of people had wondered whether the Bears would take Jalen Carter with the first overall pick. Well, they traded back in the draft, and now maybe they wind up taking him where they're sitting with the pick that they got in return from Carolina. Interestingly enough, the agent for Jalen Carter told teams he is not going to visit any team with a pick outside the top 10, so Drew Rosenhaus feels very confident that Jalen Carter will be a top 10 pick. Meanwhile, we await for interest in Lamar Jackson. There still is not an offer sheet that we've heard. There still is not a visit that we've heard. And so we will continue to wonder if and when there will be another team that is interested in trying to make some sort of deal happen with Lamar Jackson. But that market has been quiet so far. And we continue to wait on a potential trade for Aaron Rodgers, which could come down draft week potentially. The Green Bay Packers are fairly dug in their asking price from the New York Jets. The Jets are fairly dug in on what they're willing to offer. And so these two sides continue to do a dance with no end in sight. And obviously Aaron Rodgers has said he wants to be in New York playing for the Jets, but these two sides continue to be at a stalemate with no solution in sight. Everybody believes ultimately in the end they'll figure out something that gets Rodgers to New York. But here we are in early April, and it doesn't appear to be close as of this moment.
Yeah, excuse my laughing there. I was just thinking about the two teams actually dancing, the front offices of the teams. Anyway, either way, we're